They said loyalty could be trained. But that night, when Officer Daniel Hart lay dying from a weapon no one could trace, his K-9 partner, Atlas, proved the world wrong. A bond stronger than orders. A love that defied death itself. What happened inside River Point Hospital that stormy night would change everything. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe loyalty is stronger than fear, hit subscribe and stay with us till the end. Tomorrow's story will make you believe in miracles again. The night had fallen soft and heavy over Portland, Oregon, carrying the kind of stillness that usually came before the rain. Officer Daniel Hart adjusted the strap of his ballistic vest and scanned the empty walking trail that curved through River Point Park. The faint glow of street lamps flickered through the trees, casting thin bands of light across the wet pavement. His partner, a black and tan German shepherd named Atlas, padded silently at his side, every muscle alert beneath his sleek coat. The two had walked these routes hundreds of times, and though Daniel had learned to read the subtle shifts of the city's rhythm, tonight felt different, quieter, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The radio on his shoulder crackled with distant chatter from other patrols. He caught fragments of routine reports, disturbances downtown, a suspected break-in on the east side, but nothing out of the ordinary. River Point Park had been under surveillance for weeks after a series of suspicious fires had threatened nearby storage sheds. No one had been caught, but whoever was responsible had left evidence of accelerants and burned footprints in the grass. Daniel's instincts told him whoever did it would return. Atlas sniffed the damp air, tail raised slightly, his nose twitching as he caught something unseen. "Easy, boy," Daniel murmured, lowering his flashlight beam. The shepherd's ears flicked forward, muscles tightening. Daniel trusted Atlas's instincts more than most people's judgment. In Afghanistan, that nose had once saved an entire squad from walking into an explosive trap. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke. Daniel turned, scanning the playground area near the riverbank. The air was cool but carried a strange metallic tang, like ozone before lightning. "You smell that?" he asked, though the question was rhetorical. Atlas was already moving ahead, pulling at the leash, his body low and deliberate. Daniel followed, every step measured. They reached the maintenance shed near the park's edge, a weathered building the city had used to store gardening tools and fuel. The lock hung broken, the door slightly ajar. Daniel crouched, motioning for Atlas to wait. He eased the door open and swept the beam of his flashlight across the interior. Nothing, just the smell of oil, damp wood, and something else. Sweet, chemical, and wrong. The next seconds unfolded too fast for comprehension. A sharp pain exploded in Daniel's chest, radiating through his arms. The flashlight clattered from his hand as his knees buckled. His vision tunneled, darkness crowding his edges. Atlas barked sharply, the sound echoing through the park like a gunshot. Daniel tried to reach for his radio, but his hands wouldn't obey. His last coherent thought was the sight of Atlas standing over him, growling into the darkness beyond the doorway. When he came to, the world was fragments, voices, flashing lights, the rhythmic whoop of sirens. The taste of metal flooded his mouth. He tried to move, but a hand pressed him back. "Stay still, officer," someone said. "You're safe. We've got you." He caught a glimpse of his partner's face through the blur. Captain Jacob Stanton, his closest friend and fellow veteran. Jacob's expression was tight with worry. "You're going to be okay, Danny. EMTs are here. Atlas stayed with you the whole time." The rest faded into darkness again. Massachusetts General had been the pinnacle of medical precision in Boston, but in Portland, the River Point Medical Center was its counterpart, a fortress of sterile glass and unyielding light. Daniel woke beneath the hum of monitors, the world swimming into focus. Tubes ran from his arms. The air smelled of antiseptic and plastic. Every muscle in his body felt foreign. He tried to speak, but his throat rebelled. Dr. Allison Gray leaned over him, her expression both professional and weary. Her short auburn hair was tied back, and her blue scrubs bore the faintest trace of coffee stains. "Officer Hart, you're in the ICU," she said gently. "You collapsed during patrol. Your vitals were critical when you arrived, but you're stable now. You need to rest." He tried to ask what had happened, but his voice came out as a rasp. She hesitated before answering. We don't know yet. You were in cardiac distress, but your tests are inconsistent. No drugs, no toxins we can identify. It's like your body is shutting down without cause. Daniel's pulse quickened. Atlas, he whispered. A smile flickered at the edge of her lips. Your dog's fine. He wouldn't leave the ambulance. He's in the care of your captain now, but he's been trying to get back in here since you arrived. A faint sense of relief threaded through the fear. Let him, Daniel murmured. He's my partner. Dr. Gray hesitated. I'll see what I can do. By the next morning, Daniel's condition worsened. His blood pressure plummeted without explanation. His liver enzymes spiked. Every test came back clean. No infection, no poison, nothing the labs could classify. Dr. Gray called in specialists, but each left the ICU shaking their heads. It's like his cells are short-circuiting, one murmured. We can treat the symptoms, but not the cause. Meanwhile, Captain Stanton refused to leave the hospital. He sat outside the ICU window, phone pressed to his ear, coordinating officers to re-examine River Point Park. Forensics found Daniel's flashlight, his radio, and his service pistol all untouched. But something strange emerged from his duffel bag, which had been retrieved from the patrol car. The zipper had been gnawed open, as if by teeth. Inside lay a single brass shell casing, dull from age but gleaming faintly under fluorescent lights. Jacob frowned, turning it over in his gloved hand. What the hell is this doing here? He muttered. Atlas, who had been lying quietly beside the door, suddenly rose and barked sharply, eyes fixed on the casing. He pawed at the air, whining low in his throat, then looked up at Jacob with something close to urgency. Easy, boy, Jacob said, but the dog wouldn't calm. He circled the casing twice, then sat, staring at it as if daring it to move. Jacob carried it to the hospital lab. Run a full analysis, he told the technician. Every test you can. It might be nothing or everything. By evening, the results were inconclusive. The casing contained trace residues of an unidentified compound organic, but not natural. It's not gunpowder, not metal corrosion, the lab tech explained, but there's something synthetic embedded in the grooves. Whatever it is, it's microscopic. Dr. Gray frowned at the report, a deep line forming between her brows. Something synthetic, she repeated, and he collapsed after touching his gear? She looked up sharply. Captain, I want to speak to your forensics team again. We might be looking at environmental contamination. But even as she spoke, Atlas began to act strangely again. He'd been allowed inside Daniel's room after the doctors recognized how much calmer their patient became when the dog was near. The shepherd had remained still for hours, head on his paws, eyes fixed on the steady rhythm of Daniel's breathing. Now his ears twitched, nose working furiously. He stood pacing toward the small storage cabinet that held Daniel's belongings. Atlas? Dr. Gray said softly, approaching him. The dog pawed at the cabinet, growling low. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside lay Daniel's folded uniform, his badge, and tucked into a side pocket, the same brass shell casing Jacob had sent for testing, returned from the lab hours earlier. Atlas barked once, sharp and commanding. Dr. Gray stared at the casing, a chill creeping over her skin. How did this get back here? She whispered. Moments later, alarms began to shriek from Daniel's monitors. His heart rate spiked, oxygen levels plummeting. He's crashing, a nurse shouted. The medical team surged into motion, Dr. Gray shouting orders as they worked to stabilize him. Through it all, Atlas refused to move, his gaze locked on his handler, barking furiously each time the monitors dipped. It took 20 minutes to bring Daniel back. His pulse steadied, though faint. The doctors filed out one by one, exhaustion etched into their faces. Dr. Gray lingered, looking through the glass at the dog still sitting guard beside the bed. You knew, she murmured. You knew it was hurting him. Outside the ICU, Jacob Stanton returned from the lab with another report, this one stamped urgent. Allison, he said, handing it over. You're not going to like this. She scanned the page. The compound wasn't environmental, it was military. A classified synthetic neurotoxin developed for covert field use, one designed to break down into harmless byproducts after death, leaving no traceable signature. How would someone even get this? She whispered. Jacob's jaw tightened. Maybe you should ask Dr. Martin Cross. He just got here. Says he knows what we're dealing with. Dr. Martin Cross looked like the embodiment of a bygone era of medicine-gray hair, steady hands, and eyes that had seen too much. His voice was calm but heavy with authority. I've seen this kind of pattern before, he told Dr. Gray, flipping through Daniel's chart. Back in Helmand Province, 2014, experimental agents. Untraceable, self-degrading, almost elegant in their cruelty. Designed to mimic natural organ failure. You're saying this was deliberate? Jacob asked. Cross nodded gravely. Without a doubt. Someone wanted Officer Hart to die slowly and invisibly. Dr. Gray exhaled, looking through the observation window where Atlas sat, unblinking, beside his handler. Then whoever did this underestimated one thing, she said quietly. Cross raised a brow. What's that? She glanced at the German shepherd. His partner's loyalty. Outside, the rain began to fall in earnest, drumming against the glass in relentless rhythm. Inside the sterile glow of the ICU, a man fought for his life. A dog stood sentinel, and somewhere in the city's shadows, the architect of their suffering waited for the storm to pass. The morning after the collapse, the world outside River Point Medical Center was a blur of gray skies and drizzle. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed softly over the sterile corridors where nurses whispered and machines beeped in tired rhythm. Captain Jacob Stanton stood by the ICU window, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching his partner through the glass. Daniel Hart lay motionless, pale beneath the tangle of wires and monitors. Beside him, the German shepherd Atlas sat at attention, refusing food, refusing rest. The dog's unwavering gaze never left his handler's face, as if by sheer will alone, he could keep Daniel tethered to life. Dr. Allison Gray appeared behind Jacob, clipboard in hand, dark circles shadowing her eyes. He made it through the night, she said quietly. But his condition is worsening. The toxin, whatever it is attacking his nervous system now. His reflexes are nearly gone. The lab can't identify the compound. Jacob turned, frustration written across his features. So you're telling me one of the fittest men I know is dying from something no one's ever seen before? She hesitated. We might have seen something like it before, just not here. Not in civilian cases. At that moment, a new voice entered the conversation, deep, calm, and unmistakably seasoned. That's because it isn't civilian. They turned to see Dr. Martin Cross, the retired Army physician Jacob had called in as a consultant. Though his hair had gone silver, his posture still carried the discipline of service. He carried a worn leather satchel rather than a tablet, and his eyes held the weight of too many wars. This pattern, he continued, taking the chart from Dr. Gray's hands, I've seen it before. Afghanistan, 2014, a synthetic nerve agent designed to evade detection by degrading within hours. Nasty stuff, untraceable unless you know what to look for. Allison frowned. But those compounds were classified. The only people who had access were military medics, Cross finished. His gaze drifted to Daniel's chart, then to Atlas, who was watching him warily from the other side of the glass. And not just any medics, the ones with the clearance to handle experimental field chemistry. Jacob's jaw tightened. I think I know one name that fits that bill. Louis Ray. The name hung in the air like a curse. Dr. Gray looked between them. Who is he? Former field medic, Jacob said. Brilliant, ambitious, and reckless. He served with us in Kandahar. There was an incident, a rescue op that went bad. Ray disobeyed direct orders to chase a phantom target. 3 soldiers were wounded waiting for him to come back. 1 didn't make it. Daniel filed the report that got Ray court-martialed and dishonorably discharged. Dr. Cross exhaled slowly. And now Ray's here? Jacob nodded grimly. Moved to Portland 2 months ago. Bought a small warehouse near the river. The FBI's cyber unit says he's been ordering lab-grade equipment under fake business names. I think we just found our connection. By mid-afternoon, federal agents in Portland PD descended on a nondescript warehouse off Marine Drive. The rain had turned to a steady downpour, soaking the cracked asphalt. Inside, the air reeked of chemicals and metal. Rows of makeshift equipment filled the dim space centrifuges, vials, syringes, and notes pinned to the walls in meticulous handwriting. But what froze the agents in place were the photographs, dozens of them. Daniel Hart at the police gym, Daniel walking Atlas through the park, Daniel outside his apartment, every movement cataloged with military precision. Jesus Christ, one of the agents muttered. He's been stalking him. Jacob moved deeper into the lab, his flashlight beam sweeping across a whiteboard filled with formulas and hand-drawn diagrams of neural pathways. At the center of it all was a printed photo of Daniel and Atlas marked with red ink. Underneath, 3 words were scrawled in block letters. He betrayed me. In a locked cabinet, they found a tray of empty brass shell casings identical to the one Atlas had unearthed. Each was labeled by date, with residue still clinging to their interiors. Agent Karen Doss, the lead investigator, lifted one carefully with gloved hands. Modified with a heat-sensitive capsule, she observed. Each shell could release microscopic doses of the toxin when touched. If Hart carried this around, he'd have been slowly poisoned for weeks. Jacob felt a chill crawl down his spine. Ray built a time bomb you can't see, and Daniel's been carrying it with him since patrol. Agent Doss gave a curt nod. We'll get this to the CDC field lab immediately. If we can identify the compound, we might still save him. Back at River Point Medical Center, Dr. Gray and Dr. Cross worked side by side, studying the sample the FBI delivered. The results were staggering. It's a synthetic derivative of VX, Allison said, eyes wide with disbelief, but modified with nanocapsules that respond to body heat. Every time Daniel's temperature rose, every time his heart rate increased, the toxin intensified. Cross adjusted his glasses, studying the molecular diagram. This isn't improvised. This is engineered by someone who knew biochemistry inside out. Ray's fingerprints are all over it. The irony, it's almost too sophisticated for its own good. The agent degrades after exposure, leaving no trace. Almost too sophisticated, Allison repeated softly. Meaning? Cross looked up. Meaning it can't sustain itself indefinitely. If we can slow Daniel's metabolism, reduce the toxin's activation rate, we might buy time to synthesize an antidote. Allison nodded. We'll put him on induced hypothermia. I'll alert the ICU team. Outside the glass wall, Atlas lifted his head as the medical staff moved around his handler. The dog's ears flattened, a low whine rising from his chest. He didn't understand the science, but he felt the urgency, the fear. When nurses tried to move him from the room, he resisted, muscles taut, growling softly until Dr. Cross intervened. Let him stay, the old doctor said. He's calmer when he can see his partner, and I suspect his presence is doing more good than we realize. That night, the hospital was quiet except for the rhythmic hum of machines. Atlas lay near Daniel's bed, his chin resting on his paws. Occasionally, his eyes flicked toward the duffel bag in the corner. Daniel's gear, sealed and tagged by forensics. The faint metallic scent of the shell casing still lingered inside. The shepherd's nose twitched, hackles rising. He stood, pacing toward it, ears pricked. Something about that scent felt wrong, dangerous. He nosed the bag open, teeth catching on the zipper. Inside, he found another object that shouldn't have been there, a folded photograph, creased and smudged. It showed a younger Daniel in desert fatigues beside a different German shepherd, nearly identical to Atlas. Written across the bottom were 2 words in red ink, Phase 1. The door opened, and Jacob entered quietly. He froze at the sight of Atlas pawing at the bag, the photo in his teeth. What have you got there, boy? He murmured, kneeling. The name on the back of the photo caught his eye. Nero. The dog's name was Nero. Jacob's stomach turned. Ray's handwriting, he muttered. Of course. He looked down at Atlas, who was whining softly, pressing the photo toward him. You're trying to show me something, aren't you? He carried the picture to Dr. Cross, who examined it under the sterile light. That's Nero, Cross confirmed. He was Daniel's first K9 partner in Afghanistan. Killed in the same mission that got Ray discharged. He took a bullet saving Daniel's life. So this dog Atlas, he's a near-perfect match, Cross finished. Either the same breeding program or something more deliberate. Allison's breath caught. You think Ray replaced Daniel's dog? Cross nodded grimly. He could have used his contacts to obtain a littermate. Similar genetics, identical markings. It would have been easy to convince Daniel the department just reassigned him his old partner's successor. Jacob swore under his breath. So Ray didn't just poison him? He gave him a dog he could control. Allison looked through the glass at Atlas, who had returned to his place by the bed, eyes filled with sorrow and devotion. If that's true, she whispered, then Ray underestimated something profound. What's that? Jacob asked. The bond, she said simply. Whatever commands Ray thought he could program, Atlas has already broken them. He's chosen Daniel. Dr. Cross smiled faintly, the expression both sad and proud. Some bonds, he said, can't be engineered. Outside, the rain turned to thunder. Inside, a dying officer and his loyal dog fought unseen battles, one against a poison that defied medicine, the other against a destiny that defied its design. Neither had any idea that before the night was over, both would face the man who had bound them to this nightmare. The storm had been building all day, a restless mass of dark clouds pressing low over Portland. By the time night fell, the wind howled through the streets, driving rain against the windows of Riverpoint Medical Center. Inside the ICU, the glow of machines painted pale reflections on glass and steel. Officer Daniel Hart lay unconscious, his body cooled to a medically induced hypothermic state, buying the doctors a few more hours to fight the toxin coursing through his blood. Atlas lay curled beside the bed, an IV line taped to his foreleg. His breathing was shallow, his usually bright eyes dulled by exhaustion and pain. The dog had begun to show the same symptoms as his handler: tremors, disorientation, muscle weakness, proof that he too had been exposed to the compound. Dr. Allison Gray monitored both patients with grim determination. She hadn't left the hospital in 48 hours, and even her iron professionalism was beginning to crack. At 8:17 p.m., Captain Jacob Stanton entered the ICU, water dripping from his rain-soaked jacket. His expression was sharp, tense. The FBI traced Louis Ray's storage unit, he said without preamble. He's cleaned it out. Surveillance shows him leaving the site in a dark van, registered under a false name. He's off the grid. Allison's stomach sank. He's going to try to finish it, isn't he? Jacob nodded. He's already failed once. He won't make the same mistake twice. Dr. Martin Cross joined them, his face drawn and tired, but his mind still razor-sharp. If Ray's toxin was designed to be undetectable, he said, he'll want to make sure there's no chance of survival. That means he'll come here, tonight. Outside, thunder cracked so loud it rattled the glass. For a brief moment, the hospital's lights flickered. 2 floors below, an orderly pushed a cart of linens through the corridor. The wheels squeaked on the tile floor as lightning flashed outside the tall windows. He stopped to tighten one of the cart's straps and didn't notice the figure emerging from the shadows behind him. A gloved hand clamped over his mouth. A faint hiss of gas escaped from a small canister pressed against his face. Within seconds, the orderly slumped to the floor. The figure, tall, dressed in a black maintenance uniform, dragged the body into a closet and quietly locked the door. Louis Ray straightened his stolen badge and adjusted his cap, his face partially obscured by the brim. He looked up at the fluorescent lights overhead, eyes flat and unblinking. You took everything from me, Hart, he whispered. Now I'll take everything from you. He pushed the linen cart down the hall, the hum of the building's backup generators covering the soft creak of its wheels. Upstairs, the situation in the ICU had grown more desperate. The toxin in Daniel's system was accelerating again, despite the induced hypothermia. His vitals are dropping, Dr. Gray said, glancing at the monitor. We need to start the second stage of the antidote protocol. Dr. Cross nodded and handed her a syringe. This is the experimental compound from the CDC. If it doesn't work... I know, Allison said, her voice steady but tight. But it's our only shot. As she prepared the injection, Atlas stirred. His ears twitched, nostrils flaring. The dog's body went rigid, his head snapping toward the door. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Jacob frowned. What's wrong with him? Something's not right, Dr. Cross said softly. He smells it. A second later, the overhead lights blinked once, twice, then went dark. The room plunged into sudden blackness. The only illumination came from the monitors. their green and blue lights pulsing across the walls like ghostly heartbeats. Outside the ICU, alarm bells began to sound as emergency generators sputtered to life. "Backup power's online," Jacob said, drawing his weapon. "Stay here." But before he could reach the door, a hiss filled the air. A small canister rolled across the floor, spinning to a stop near the bed. White vapor billowed upward, acrid and fast-spreading. The nurses screamed as the gas filled the room. "Gas!" Allison shouted. "Seal the vents! Get everyone out!" Jacob grabbed the canister with a towel and hurled it into the corridor, coughing violently as the smoke burned his throat. The hallway was already filling with the same white haze. From the darkness, a calm voice spoke. "Hello, Captain Stanton." Jacob froze. The silhouette in the hall was unmistakable. Louis Ray stepped into the light of the emergency lamps, a gas mask covering his face. In his hand, a pistol gleamed. "You should have stayed out of this," Ray said, voice muffled but unmistakably controlled. "You always were too loyal for your own good." Jacob raised his weapon. "Drop it, Ray. It's over." Ray chuckled softly. "No, this is where it ends. For him." He nodded toward Daniel's room. "And for that thing you call a dog." Inside the ICU, Dr. Gray had dragged Daniel's bed away from the thickest part of the gas cloud. Atlas, despite his weakness, staggered to his feet and placed himself between Ray and his handler, his teeth bared in a silent snarl. "Stay back," Allison warned Ray, her hand gripping a metal tray as a makeshift weapon. Ray ignored her. "Do you even know what he did to me?" he hissed, stepping closer. "One report, one signature, and my life was over. I lost everything. My career, my purpose, my name." "You lost it because you abandoned men under fire," Dr. Gray said coldly. "You chose yourself over your team." Ray's eyes burned behind the mask. "And Hart was judge, jury, and executioner, but I'm giving him a trial of my own." He reached into his coat and produced a syringe filled with a pale yellow liquid. "This is the neutralizer," he said. "Once I inject him, every antidote you've given him will fail. His body will finish what I started." Atlas growled louder, crouching low, ready to spring. "You're not going to touch him," Allison said through clenched teeth. Ray tilted his head. "Funny, that's what his last dog thought too." Before anyone could react, Ray hurled the empty canister at the far wall. The distraction was enough. He lunged forward, driving his arm toward Daniel's IV line. But Atlas was faster. The shepherd launched himself from the floor, slamming into Ray's shoulder with all the strength left in his trembling body. The syringe went flying, clattering across the tiles. Ray shouted, trying to shake the dog off, but Atlas had his arm locked in powerful jaws, blood seeping through Ray's sleeve. Jacob stormed into the room, gun raised. "Drop it!" he barked. Ray twisted, shoving Atlas aside. The dog hit the floor hard, yelping in pain but immediately trying to rise again. In one motion, Ray drew his pistol and fired. The shot missed Jacob by inches, shattering a monitor screen. Dr. Cross dove for the emergency alarm, triggering a full hospital lockdown. Sirens blared throughout the building. Security personnel began sealing exits, but Ray moved with practiced precision, shoving over equipment to block the door. "You're all too late," he snarled, kicking Atlas as the dog lunged again. "He's already dying, and this time no miracle will save him." But as he turned to finish the job, a sound froze him mid-motion. A hoarse, broken voice from the hospital bed. "Louis." Everyone turned. Daniel Hart, pale and weak but conscious, was staring directly at Ray. His voice was barely audible, yet it carried enough force to halt the chaos around him. "You think this makes us even?" Ray hesitated, shock flickering in his eyes. "You should be dead." Daniel forced himself to sit upright, his body trembling, the IV line pulling taut. "You can poison my body, Ray," he whispered, "but you'll never understand loyalty. That's why you lost. That's why Atlas will always beat you." Ray's hand shook as he raised the gun again. "Shut up!" But Atlas was already moving. Summoning every last ounce of strength, the shepherd lunged once more, teeth sinking into Ray's wrist. The gun went off, the bullet burying itself harmlessly in the wall. Jacob charged forward, tackling Ray to the ground. The syringe skittered beneath a cabinet. In the struggle, Ray tried to reach for a knife strapped to his belt, but Atlas pinned him down, growling deep in his throat. The dog's muzzle was streaked with blood, his own breathing ragged, yet his eyes never left the man who had tried to kill his partner. Within seconds, FBI agents stormed in, weapons drawn. Ray was handcuffed and dragged away, screaming curses at Daniel and the dog who had ruined his revenge. When the chaos subsided, the room was a wreck of overturned equipment and shattered glass. Dr. Gray moved quickly, checking Daniel's vitals. His pulse was faint but steady. "He's stable," she said softly. "For now." But her relief faded when she turned to Atlas. The dog lay motionless on the floor, his chest rising shallowly. Jacob dropped to his knees beside him. "Come on, buddy, stay with us." Dr. Cross knelt next to them, checking Atlas's eyes. "He's taken a lethal dose of exposure. The toxin's in his bloodstream now." Daniel, barely conscious, whispered, "Save him, please." "We'll try," Allison said, her voice breaking. "We'll try." They lifted the dog onto a gurney beside Daniel's bed. For the first time, both warrior and protector lay side by side, bound by the same poison, the same fate. Outside, the storm began to ease, the thunder fading into distant echoes. But inside the hospital, a different kind of storm was only just beginning. Dr. Cross looked toward the window, his expression grim. "We've got 8 hours before the toxin shuts down their systems completely," he said. "After that, there's no coming back." Dr. Gray met his eyes. "Then we work until there's nothing left to give." And as dawn's first light broke weakly over the rain-slick city, 2 lives, man and dog, hung suspended between science and something deeper, something unexplainable. Morning crept into Portland beneath a bruised sky. The rain had thinned to a soft mist, and a weak light filtered through the windows of River Point Medical Center. Inside the ICU, silence pressed against every surface. The kind of silence that carried both fear and fragile hope. 2 lives hung suspended between death and survival. On one bed lay Officer Daniel Hart, his skin pale, his pulse faint but steady. On the other, his K9 partner Atlas, the great black and tan shepherd, lay still under oxygen flow, his heartbeat slow and erratic. The air smelled faintly of saline and antiseptic, and of loyalty that refused to die. Dr. Allison Gray hadn't slept. She stood between the 2 beds, eyes red, hands trembling as she double-checked the monitors. "Their vitals are sinking," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "It's like their bodies are reacting to each other." Dr. Martin Cross stood beside her, exhaustion etched deep into his features. "We bought them time," he said quietly, "but not much. The antidote slowed the breakdown, not reversed it." Across the room, Captain Jacob Stanton leaned against the wall, arms crossed, face shadowed with guilt. "Ray's in custody. The feds are charging him under federal bioweapon statutes," he said bitterly. "But it won't mean a damn thing if Daniel doesn't wake up." Dr. Gray looked at him. "He will, and so will Atlas." But even she didn't fully believe it. Both man and dog were fading, together as if one life could not continue without the other. By noon, a fragile rhythm began to return. The antidote compound, refined overnight by Dr. Cross and the CDC team, had stabilized Daniel's organs. His breathing deepened, his color returned slightly. But Atlas wasn't improving. His body trembled in waves, and his pupils had dilated unevenly. "He's slipping," Allison whispered, crouching beside the dog. "The neurotoxins are destroying his motor function. We're running out of time." Dr. Cross placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "There might be one last option," he said, "but it's unconventional." Jacob looked up. "How unconventional?" Cross hesitated. "The antidote works by attaching itself to living cells, replacing damaged proteins. But Atlas's metabolism is faster than a human's. The compound burns through him too quickly." "So what are you suggesting?" Cross met their eyes, his expression grim. "A blood-linked transfusion. We use Daniel's antibodies, his body's adaptation to the toxin, and transfer part of it to Atlas. It's experimental, dangerous, but it might reset the dog's system." Allison stared at him. "You're talking about linking their bloodstreams directly." "Yes," Cross said. "They've survived everything together. If there's a chance, even 1 in 100, It'll come from that bond. Jacob hesitated. If Daniel wakes up and finds out we used him as a donor without consent? Allison interrupted softly. He'd want us to. You know he would. Jacob looked from the unconscious officer to the dog lying beside him. He nodded. Then do it. Hours passed in slow motion. The room was transformed into a makeshift operating chamber. IV lines connected man and dog, their pulses monitored in unison. Allison worked carefully, her gloved hands steady as she oversaw the transfusion. Start the drip, Cross instructed. Slow and measured. We can't shock either system. Drop by drop, Daniel's blood began to flow into Atlas's veins, carrying traces of the antidote his body had started to produce naturally. The monitors hummed in rhythm, one heartbeat echoing the other. For a long time, nothing happened. Then faintly, Atlas's paw twitched. His breathing steadied. A soft sound, half growl, half whine, escaped his throat. Allison's breath caught. He's responding, she whispered. Jacob stepped forward, eyes wide. Come on, Atlas. You've got this, buddy. 10 minutes later, Atlas's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded them. Then he turned his head weakly toward the bed beside him, toward Daniel. And at that exact moment, Daniel's eyes opened too. The room froze. Machines beeped wildly as both man and dog blinked in tandem, their gazes finding each other through the haze of light and shadow. Daniel's voice came hoarse and broken. You made it, boy. Atlas's tail thumped weakly against the sheet. Allison pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. It worked, she whispered. It actually worked. 2 weeks later, the recovery wing of the hospital was a place of cautious celebration. Daniel was walking again, slow but steady. Atlas had regained full mobility, though a faint scar along his flank served as a reminder of how close he'd come to dying. Nurses and officers from the precinct came daily to visit the pair who had survived the impossible. Jacob entered one morning carrying 2 cups of coffee and a grin. You made front-page news, he said, tossing a newspaper onto Daniel's bed. The headline read, Officer and K9 partner survive military toxin. Doctors call it a medical miracle. Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. Guess we're famous now, huh? More like legends, Jacob said. Then his tone softened. You saved that dog's life, Danny. Daniel looked down at Atlas, who rested his head on his lap. No, he said quietly. He saved mine first. A month later, the Portland Police Department held a small ceremony in the courtyard behind headquarters. The mayor presented medals for valor to both Daniel and Atlas. Cameras flashed, reporters called questions, and applause rolled through the crowd. But Daniel barely heard any of it. His eyes stayed on Atlas, who stood proud and calm at his side, the medal glinting on his collar. When his turn came to speak, Daniel stepped up to the microphone, his voice steady but thick with emotion. We like to think loyalty can be trained, he said. That obedience comes from commands and repetition. But loyalty, real loyalty, comes from choice. Atlas didn't follow an order that night. He followed his heart. The audience fell silent. Daniel looked down at his partner and smiled faintly. You can train obedience, he continued, but you can't train love. That's something they choose, just like we do. Months later, Daniel and Atlas returned to service, not on patrol but in a new role. Together, they joined a therapy program for veterans and trauma survivors, working in hospitals and recovery centers. Atlas would lie beside broken soldiers, his quiet presence easing what words could not. Daniel spoke to children about courage, healing, and second chances. One afternoon, as they left a veterans hospital, a young boy in a wheelchair rolled up and asked shyly, Mister, is he your dog? Daniel smiled. No, he said, kneeling so they were eye to eye. We belong to each other. The boy grinned and reached out. Atlas leaned forward, pressing his nose gently to the child's hand. For a brief, silent moment, everything, the pain, the loss, the memories of the past, faded into something brighter. That evening, Daniel drove home through the quiet streets of Portland, the sun sinking low behind the skyline. In the passenger seat, Atlas rested his head out the window, ears lifted by the wind. As the city lights flickered to life, Daniel whispered, We made it, partner. Atlas gave a soft bark, as if answering, We always will. And for the first time since that night in River Point Park, Daniel felt peace. Not because the danger was over, but because he knew that no matter what the world threw their way, duty, darkness, death, they would face it the same way they always had, side by side, heart to heart.